Happy morning, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. And last night, I sat through the vice presidential debate. Now, normally when I have to do a recap of something like this the next morning, I say, I suffered through this, so you didn't have to. And actually, that is not something that I would say applied to this debate. This debate was considerably better in performance from the vice presidential candidates than any of the presidential candidates that we've received for the last several election cycles. And that is not a good thing. But I would also say that if there is something that you were looking for content to fill a space today, then maybe listening to the 90-minute recap of last night's debate would be something that would be relatively easy to take in. A debate was the definition of civility, which is something that we don't see a whole lot today. So I would say hats off to both candidates and their ability to maintain respect and decorum throughout the entire thing. Now, there are a few excerpts that I'm going to show you because the guns were invoked specifically in one question, and then general thoughts on the whole process. So we'll get to those after we hear a quick word from today's sponsor. Mission First Tactical has been a longtime supporter of the channel, all the way back to one of the first products that we ever tested from them. You would recognize them as an accessory company, but they are so much more than that in that they have diversified, offering everything from concealed carry backpacks with armor considerations to cool drinkware and holsters. Check out Mission First Tactical. We have 2 discount codes for them over on the affiliates page. One of them is the all the time everything, and then the closeouts code, which is like 50 to 60% off in some instances. So special thanks to Mission First Tactical for making today's video possible. Now, there was a specific question asked about guns, and here it is.
We want to turn now to America's gun violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Now, before I let JD answer that question, I think it's important that we actually fact check the moderators, because there are some substantive problems with the way they ask that question that are pretty misleading. And I'm not trying to minimize the fact that there are people out there that are being killed. However, the way that that statistic is presented, the leading cause of death in children and teens, is a specific phrasing mechanism that allows them to bring in the upper limits of what teens means into the statistics, as in your 18 and 19-year-olds. And in many cases, when that data is run, oftentimes they say children, teens, and young adults. That allows them to pull in the 20-year-old data as well. And they do that specifically so that they can pull in the crime data, the data associated with gang violence, drug violence, and all the other associated things with that, that artificially enhances those statistics and make them look much, much worse when you've got a soundbite like this. So when you see that statistic, know that that is not entirely true, and it is fairly misleading. And I think that that's important in the context because JD knows that. And this is how he responds, knowing that information.
Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that worked. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go? When we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. And I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay.
So.
Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said, actually, about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly, weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is, okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse, or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it's only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is, talking about cities and where it's at, the number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues, making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns, and there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
I wanted to make sure that I played that uninterrupted because I think the back and forth exchange is exceedingly important when you try to decipher what is being said, because you're going to see this cut up 100 different ways on the internet. But the take home here is, you've got one side that says, hey, we have some solutions that we know will absolutely work. And you got another side that says, oh, well, emotion, emotion, emotion. Do this thing because it'll make us feel better about it, instead of actually putting things in place that will fix the problem. Because I'm going to tell you right now, you're running on we got to ban this, got to ban that. You've said multiple times that you're not about taking people's guns. So if that is the case, then these two things do not result in a substantive change. Because if you are talking about banning assault weapons and not confiscating them from people, then you've got several 100 million of them in circulation in the United States already. So what change did that implement whatsoever? In light of the fact that the Supreme Court is getting ready to hear a case on assault weapon bans here very shortly, and the whole argument about common use of various weapons and AR-15s drastically, my phone, not yours, drastically outpacing the numbers required for the common use test. This is a bunch of bluster and bullcrap. These are not stupid people, but they believe that you are, because they're lying to your face about their gun policies. And obviously there are some people out there that believe this drivel. It's always about the inanimate object. We have a sickness in our country. It's a multifaceted sickness, and it's going to take a lot of work to get to it. But infringing on the constitutional rights of American citizens is not going to get it done. That is the firearms-related incident as it related to this debate. But overall, what I would say, again, is that the exchange was good. Who won the debate? Well, I would say that it was pretty even. JD definitely comes off as considerably more put together than Tim Walz. Tim Walz comes off as nervous and as though he's constantly trying to cover up his constant misspeaks, quote unquote, misrepresentations of himself. But all in all, it seemed pretty even despite those personality problems until this happened.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank you,
Margaret. The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process.
Let's go back to the rules for a second.
In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set.
Does this sound to you like it was uncivil or decorum was degrading or anything like that? No.
The audience can't hear you because your mics are cut.
No, actually, we could hear what the man said, even though you shushed him. In the act of shushing J.D. Vance, in the middle of him correcting the record, was the worst thing that they could have done as far as being in the corner of their candidate, because everybody today is going to forget about everything else that was said last night during the debate. There was some good stuff in there, and this one clip is going to dominate the internet here today. So what I would say is, not only did JD look more put together, Tim Walz looked nervous and kind of all over the place trying to protect himself from the lies that he's told for years, but also the moderators came off yet again as solidly biased, even though this may have been, if you watch the whole exchange, this may have been just the exact wrong time to push the button. That is not the way the internet is going to remember it. The shushed, and they cut the record off as the man was making the point, because it hurt the person they want to see installed in the position of power. And that's what I have for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments section down below.